Previously on SportsTalk.
Ben Roethlisberger has played many more years than Andrew Luck has in the NFL.
Come talk to me when Andrew Luck has
That is the most
Super Bowls.
absurd comment I've ever heard on this show. That is ridiculous.
Is that blasphemous?
That is blasphemous.
I'm out. That's ridiculous. That is literally ridiculous.
Oh my God.
That's ridiculous. That's the worst comment I've ever heard on the show.
Oh my God.
I'm out.
This week, the feud continues.
Hello, North Haven, and as you saw just recently, they did have a big debate between Holden and Jeremy, and that is why I'm wearing the ref shirt today. I'm Justin Palillo, the referee. I'm here with debater 1, Jeremy Freena, and debater 2, Holden Pirelli. And we got a good show for you today. We're going to debate a couple topics that they have different opinions on, and we're also going to do just a regular sports talk like we always do. But starting off, Jeremy, I know you're really big on this, but I'm going to ask you and Holden, but I'll start with Jeremy. What is the SEC? What is its impact on NCAA football playoffs? And what do you just think the impact is with that conference in the playoffs?
With the SEC, this is something that I've always had strong opinions on. I feel like when you have so many powerhouses within one conference, I mean, the list goes on. You name off all these teams, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, 2 surprise teams, and no one was really expecting them to be what they have become. You know, Mississippi State obviously ranked number 1, and Ole Miss was ranked up in the standings in the top 5 as well. But you look at these teams, and then you have the teams that are always there, the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Auburns. They're always competing and doing what they need to do to be on top of on the college football world. And I said from the beginning, I feel like there was going to be a cannibalism here. Something was going to happen with it amongst these teams. I mean, you've already seen it. Auburn had 1 loss. They were set to be in the college football playoff if they won out, and then they get upset by Texas A&M, a team that they take out Kenny Hill, put in a freshman, and he ends up playing well, and they end up winning the game. Just so many teams are always on upset alert in this conference because even a team like Arkansas hasn't won an SEC game in 2 seasons, comes and threatens a team like Georgia and even threatens a team like Alabama. So it's hard for these teams to remain either 1 loss or 2 loss or wherever they have to be consistent within it. So I think that overall, because of all the losses in the SEC, you look at one of the only undefeated teams left in the entire country. You have Mississippi State. They're going to have to go into Alabama and beat them and then play Ole Miss to end their season. I think they're going to lose at least one of those games. Then you look at Alabama, who's the other 1-loss team, or the 1-loss team that's set to make a good run in the college football playoff to be in from the SEC. They're going to have to beat Mississippi State, obviously, at home, but then they're going to have to beat Auburn at the end of the season. It's going to be hard for them to win both those games. Then they could have to play a conference championship game against a team like Georgia that's got a lot of talent around them. Obviously, Todd Gurley is going to be back, so that's going to be a different team. I think the SEC doesn't even end up in the college football playoffs because of the cannibalism that's already occurred and that's going to occur in the ensuing weeks.
Okay, so Holden, I know you might have a different opinion on this to Jeremy. I know you're big on the SEC. What do you think?
Yeah, I love the SEC. I mean, I get up every Saturday to watch the SEC. It's the most competitive division in college football. It's the power conference. I mean, especially that SEC West division with the likes of Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I mean, all year we've been talking about how there's a real chance that we could have a 2-loss team in the college football playoff, and if it's a 2-loss team, it's most likely going to be from the SEC. I mean, every other power conference, all the analysts have said have to either be undefeated or have just 1 loss, with the exception of the SEC, because it's so competitive that I think the College Football Committee would overlook an SEC team for having 2 losses. I mean, you look at Alabama. Alabama could lose to Mississippi State. They could lose to Auburn, then have 3 losses. I mean, Mississippi State could lose to Ole Miss and Alabama and have 2 losses. Auburn already has 2 losses. Texas A&M obviously has 3 losses. A team like LSU has 3 losses. Then you have a team like Ole Miss with 2 losses. I mean, the schedule is so competitive in the SEC right now for a lot of these 2-loss teams that we really don't know if there's going to be an SEC team in the playoff, but I think there will be because the strength of schedule in the SEC is so tough and so much more grueling than any other conference. I think the College Football Committee would definitely consider an SEC team.
We'll just go over our 4 teams we'll put in.
Okay, so before the show, I asked Jeremy and Holden what their top 4 teams were. Holden said Florida State at I don't know, was this in any specific order?
Yeah.
No order here. Yeah, no order.
So there are 4 teams, no specific order: Florida State, Oregon, Alabama, and TCU. And for Jeremy, he also has Florida State, but then he's got Ohio State, Oregon, and Baylor filling out his top 4. So Holden, I'm gonna keep it on you here. Why did you pick this top 4?
I definitely went with Florida State. They're the defending national champions. They're undefeated right now. Jameis Winston's playing spectacular football. They haven't lost a game yet this season. So a lot of people said they haven't won decisively and they haven't won pretty, but they're still winning. So I'm going to consider them right now. Also, I consider Oregon. Marcus Mariota is looking like a Heisman candidate this year so far. He's playing like a stud, as always. And the Pac-12 is pretty much a cakewalk. Stanford's having a terrible year. Oregon State's having a terrible year. A lot of these Pac-12 teams are very weak right now in a usually strong conference. So I think the nod goes to Oregon to represent the Pac-12. Then I think Alabama right now, they have to beat Auburn and they have to beat Mississippi State left on their schedule to really lock up a bid in the college football playoff. I think they'll beat Auburn right now. Auburn has 2 losses. They lost that close game at home to Texas A&M, and then I think Alabama will close it out against Mississippi State because as I've been watching Mississippi State, they started off the season really, really strong, but with each game you can see the grind of the SEC schedule wearing down. On them. They just barely beat Kentucky at home. If you can't beat Kentucky in this SEC at home, you can see the signs of weakness starting to form in Mississippi State. I love Dak Prescott, but the rest of that team is starting to crumble. I can see it. And finally, I think TCU with Trevon Boykin, that is an explosive offense. I think more explosive than even Oregon's looked in the past couple of years. I love that TCU team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They do have that blip on the radar with that loss to Baylor. Away at Baylor, they gave up 61 points. That was crazy, but otherwise they've showed up against every other team. They beat Kansas State, who I thought was going to make the playoff because they've beaten everyone they've played with the exception of TCU, and before that they narrowly lost to Auburn.
Jeremy, what do you think? Why did you say these 4 teams to make it?
Florida State, basically, because they were basically handed their way in. I don't feel like they played anyone this year. The Clemson team, that's supposed to be, one of their marquee games, they end up beating, with Jameis Winston not even in the game, their star player, the Heisman Trophy winner coming back. I didn't see that as a signature win. And the win against Notre Dame, I'm still not convinced Notre Dame was a legitimate team this season. They played well against a Stanford team that, like Holden said, was having a down year. And then they lose to Arizona State the past weekend, having some crazy number of turnovers. I think it was 4 or 5. That's obviously not going to put you in a position to win any games by any means. And the Notre Dame game comes down to an offensive pass interference call on the second to last play of the game on a 3rd and goal, I believe it was. So, if that goes the other way, we're talking about Florida State not even being in this conversation because they don't really have a legitimate schedule like a team like from the SEC could have. Then I had Ohio State just because I think someone from the Big Ten is going to be in it. I thought it was going to be Michigan State. I thought they were going to be able to beat Ohio State, and then their only blemish would be a loss to Oregon, a team that a lot of people are putting in the college football playoff now. I think that if they were able to do it, if they were able to beat Ohio State, they would have been able to do well. Ohio State loses Braxton Miller at the beginning of the season. They lose one early on, and then they end up playing so well down the stretch, beating this Michigan State team. I think that they're really going to have a shot here. I think that they're going to give them a shot. I don't know if they're going to be able to succeed in the college football playoff, but I think that they're going to be given it because as much as the SEC is the power conference, I think the committee wants the diversity. I don't think anyone really wants to see a 3-team SEC playoff just because they want the diversity. They want to see if these, Big 12 or Pac-12, if these teams can contend with these SEC teams that have been so powerful. And Oregon playing, Michigan State going in, playing teams in the SEC in past seasons. Oregon did it a couple years back, playing LSU early on. I think they want to see these matchups to see if the SEC really prepares these teams for the next level. I have Oregon at 3. I think there's a couple winning in games right now. I think one of them is Oregon, Arizona State. That's going to be coming up. Whichever team wins that, I think is going to get in. I'm going to give the edge to Oregon just because Arizona State did look a little shaky in their win against Notre Dame. Notre Dame had the 5 turnovers. They basically handed them the win there. So I think that if Arizona State could pull off this upset, they're going to be the team in from the Pac-12. But I think regardless, someone's going to get in. Right now, I'm going to give the edge to Oregon. And in my 4th spot, I have Baylor. Honestly, I think TCU is the better team. But based on how the committee's going to be picking this, it's going to come down to who's the conference champions and head-to-head and whatnot. Right now, TCU has the edge because strength of schedule. I think it's because of a win they had against a Big Ten team I believe it was Minnesota. And then that's why they're going to be in right now. I think at the end of the season, when Baylor's going to be crowned the champions, obviously if they win out because of their head-to-head win against TCU, that's who's going to come in through the Big 12. Despite I do love Boykin and what he's been doing there, but I think TCU's a better team. But just based on how the committee's going to be selecting this, I'm going to have to put Baylor in at the 4th spot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love all your selections right there, Jeremy, except for the Ohio State pick, because I really, really want a team from the Big Ten to get in, and I thought, like you, was going to be Michigan State, because prior to losing to Ohio State, their only loss was away at Oregon, so that's a tough environment to play in. But then you look at Ohio State, and they lose Braxton Miller, they put in J.T. Barrett, who's looked pretty good so far this year, but they lose to Virginia Tech at home, which was, I mean, it's one thing to lose at home, it's another thing to lose to Virginia Tech, who have looked terrible this year. And, I mean, I'm really surprised you didn't pick an SEC team. You don't think an SEC team will make the college football playoff?
SEC team's not going to make the college football playoff because I don't think they're going to put a 2-loss team in. And I think if Mississippi State gets knocked off, there's a lot of doubt amongst this team right now. They have them at the 1 spot, but it's because of what they did earlier on. Obviously, like you said, the close game against Kentucky. I think that Alabama is going to knock them off. I don't think there's any way Mississippi State goes into Alabama and beats them in that environment. And then I don't think they're going to put a team like Auburn in. And I think Auburn has the potential of beating Alabama. I mean, this team is basically playing spoiler, and there's nothing more than what those Tigers want to do than go into Alabama and take any shot they have of making the college football playoffs and destroy it right on scene. I mean, the rivalry between these two teams, I think that Nick Marshall and that Auburn offense is going to come out, play the way they have to win that game. And if you look back, this team really could be a 1-loss team. They fumble at like the 5 or something. Nick Marshall, there was a miscommunication, and then they fumble again when they're driving down against Texas A&M. I mean, this is still legitimately a 1-loss team and probably still in the college football playoff picture if you take away those 2 miscues, and one of them results in at least a field goal or a touchdown. So I think that overall, I don't think the committee's going to give the SEC team the benefit of the doubt, because I think if they all have 2 losses, which is very possible, obviously, Mississippi State could go and lose to Ole Miss. They could lose all Alabama and Ole Miss, and then Auburn can be Alabama, which is a very possible situation. So I think that if this occurs, I don't think they'll put an SEC team in.
It is strange not seeing an SEC team in, but we'll see what happens. Moving on, we're going to go into the NBA. 2 weeks ago on the show, there was a big debate over Derrick Rose, and so I'm going to pose a question to both them on do you guys think Derrick Rose will ever be an MVP player again, like he did back in 2011? So do you think he'll ever be at that level again? I'll start with you, Holden.
I think Derrick Rose has all the potential in the world and all the ability to be that MVP player he was in 2011. I mean, just the other night, he scored 24 points and dished out 7 assists. He has all the ability and all the skill. It's just a matter of him being healthy for the rest of the season and him having that right mindset and not being fragile when you're stepping onto the court. And I was so disappointed the other day when I hear stuff coming out of Derrick Rose's mouth like, I'm thinking about my career after basketball. Dude, you're 26 years old. You have a good 4 to 6 years left in the NBA of good quality NBA years in you. And you're already talking about what life will be like for you after the NBA. That is just blasphemous. That is just outrageous. That makes me sick to my stomach for a team like the Chicago Bulls that did everything to put the pieces around you with Pau Gasol, Joakim Noah. Jeremy's loving this right now. You had Luol Deng at one point. You have the coach in Tom Thibodeau. You have all the pieces to win a title right now, and you're talking about your career after basketball. That just makes me sick to my stomach. But yes, I do believe Derrick Rose has all the ability. He just needs to stay healthy. And you know what? If he can't stay healthy, then you know what you need to do? You need to become like Kobe and increase your pain threshold. How much pain and how much suffering can you tolerate? You need to grab the Advil, grab the ibuprofen, take a couple pills, head out on the court, dude. You need to be able to grind through pain and just play on nails, dude. That's what Kobe does. That's what Carmelo does. That's what LeBron does. LeBron's never really been injured in his career. Kobe's been injured. He's had broken fingers and all that stuff, but he still goes out and he wins you 5 rings for the Los Angeles Lakers. So Derrick Rose, get it together, dude.
Jeremy, do you have a response? I know how you feel about Derrick Rose.
Derrick Rose is someone I like him. I like his game. I think he's a great player, but players play. This guy sprains his ankles
Both
is
ankles.
out both ankles,
Both ankles.
regardless. I mean, this guy is literally made of paper, and then he sits, 4 games or 5 games or something like that. I mean, if you're the star of this team, you need to be out there every chance you get. I mean, there's so many players in this league that have played through so much pain. Or if it's Kobe playing through a broken finger, or Joakim Noah with the plantar fasciitis in the postseason last year. There's so many players
Rondo
that
came back with that dislocated
yeah,
elbow
Rondo
against the
playing
Heat
with
back in
one
the playoffs.
arm in the postseason. I think there's so many players that go out and play at such a high level, even when they're going through pain. I mean, even if it's not a high level, at least being on the court, no one can say you weren't there for the team. You at least gave it 110%. I think this guy cares more about his life after basketball than he does about basketball. When you're a first overall pick, a guy that led a Memphis team in the NCAA tournament that no one had heard of beforehand. You become the first pick in the draft, you win an MVP, you have to be all about basketball. And I don't think he has the passion that a LeBron James has, a Kobe Bryant has, a guy that's going to go out and do everything he can to win a ring and do everything he can to bring pride to his city, whether it's LA for Kobe or hopefully LeBron's able to bring one home to Cleveland. That's what you need from your star. And what kind of example is he setting for the younger guys in the system, like a Doug McDermott or someone like that, a guy just coming in, and he's seeing the star of the team taking a night off because he's not feeling 100%. That's just not being a good role model. It's just, you need to be better than that. You're the face of the franchise. They're investing millions of dollars in you. Adidas is investing, 10 years, $240 million in you. They don't have to do that. They have faith in you. You need to have faith in yourself, and you need to go out and perform at the level you're capable of, regardless of if you're 100%. I mean, if you're 20%, then you shouldn't go out that game. But if you're 80%, like I feel like he was down this last 4 or 5 game stretch, I think he needs to go out and at least put on the uniform for the Chicago Bulls.
If you look at this just from a pure MVP standpoint, as will he ever be MVP again at 100%? I don't think he will, and here's why. Even if he is 100%, Derrick Rose, I'm going to say he's going to be an elite player in the league, definitely in the top 5 point guards, possibly in the top 5 player category or top 10 player category, but I don't think he'll win MVP because if you look at the depth on the Chicago Bulls team, I mean, like you mentioned, Doug McDermott's coming up. I mean, Jimmy Butler's been playing very well this season, averaging 20 points a game, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, so he's coming up big time if he can continue. Joakim Noah's there. Pau Gasol's going to be there for another couple years. So I think even if Derrick Rose is 100% this year, the scoring, he's not going to be scoring like he did back in 2011 because there's a lot more players on his team this year. He basically, back in 11, he was the only guy on that team as far as offense goes. This year they got plenty of weapons on offense. So I think he's really going to help his team big time. He will be a very good point guard in this league, and I think if he is healthy, he'll lead the Bulls into the finals this year. But as far as winning an MVP, I can't see that coming up in the future career just because of the depth on the Bulls have. But if for some reason all the good players on the Bulls leave, or maybe Rose goes to another team, then maybe if he's playing. But we'll just have to see. But I think at 100%, this guy is an elite point guard, and the only thing that's really holding him back now is the other people around him.
Absolutely.
Okay, keeping it with the NBA, we talked about Kobe Bryant a little bit in last topic with playing injured, but I'm going to ask you guys, would it be better for Kobe Bryant to stay in Los Angeles or get another ring elsewhere? What do you think would be better for his legacy?
I think Kobe's got to match the 6 that Jordan put up because regardless of what city he's in, you got to match the 6 that Jordan put up. This is the guy everyone wants to be. When you come into the league, when LeBron was coming up, everyone was, this is the next Jordan. This is the next great thing. You got to try to match the number that this guy put up. He didn't lose in the finals, talking about Michael Jordan. This guy went 6-0. He played. Technically, Jordan didn't spend his whole career in one spot either. He did play for the Washington Wizards, so it's not even something that they could hold against him.
When he was 40.
Regardless, he did not play his entire career in one uniform. I think that the Los Angeles Lakers have much respect for Kobe, obviously giving him the contract that he probably isn't worth at this point. I think that he's honestly holding this Lakers organization back right now. We had talked about this earlier in one show. Should the Lakers keep Kobe or should they get rid of him? I believe that keeping Kobe is the right thing to do just based on what he's brought to the city, what he's been through, all he's done for the team, 5 championships. I mean, it's hard to match that. And then letting him go would leave a sour taste in your mouth. But I think Kobe should honestly leave because there's plenty of teams that would sign him to, a minimum deal or whatever it is. I mean, imagine if Kobe goes to, a team like the Cavs right now and can become a role player. he doesn't even have to play much. He plays, 15, 20 minutes a game. This guy can't play the 38 minutes that they want him to play. Whenever he does, he hurts something, whether it's tearing his ACL or a meniscus injury or whatever it is. He can't do that anymore. You can't expect this guy to lead the Lakers like he did throughout his career. They either need to bring in a guy, whether it's Kevin Love in this offseason or Rajon Rondo or whatever they think they're going to do, and he needs to be on the face of the franchise. And if the Lakers aren't able to do this, Kobe needs to look elsewhere if he wants to really compete on a team. And I don't think Kobe wants to be on a losing team. This guy has never faced adversity like that. I mean, when he's with Dwight Howard in their, the 7 seed or whatever it was, playing the Spurs, I mean, he wants to be on the court, and it seems like Dwight doesn't even care. And this guy has the fire. He wants to be in the position to win another ring again, and he's not going to get that with the Los Angeles Lakers organization. So he needs to move on, go somewhere. Whether it's for 2 years he plays on a contender, whether it's the Cavs, maybe he can go to a team like OKC or something like that.
Or Memphis.
And just be a role player. You can still be a star. You can still be the face of a franchise. He just needs to be somewhere.
Should he go to the Pelicans, the team that drafted him? Holden, what do you think about this? I mean, we saw you shaking your head over there a little bit.
I think Kobe Bryant is a fresh take or a fresh perspective kind of player in the NBA. And in the league today, where we have guys like LeBron, guys like Kevin Durant,
James
Westbrook, I mean, these guys are all coming together to form big threes. I mean, there's big threes, dynamic duos all over the place, assembled through the draft or free agency. I mean, just look at teams like Cleveland with Kevin Love and LeBron James, Miami with Chris Bosh, D. Wade, and LeBron when he was there, a team like Houston with James Harden and Dwight Howard. What could possibly happen down the road in Washington? Could Kevin Durant leave for the capital of the United States and join up John Wall? I mean, there are big threes and dynamic duos popping up all over the place, and it's nice to see players like Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, and Dirk Nowitzki, older players who are going to be lifers with their respective franchises. I mean, Dirk just signed a 3-year, $25 million deal. For the type of player he is, he should be making like $20 million a year, but he chose a discounted deal because he wants to win so badly. And so he chose to stay with the Mavericks. I mean, he just has so much respect for that franchise. And then you look at a guy like Kobe, and I really think he wants to be a Laker for life. He's won 5 rings for that franchise. It's the only franchise he's ever played for. And he's 36, 37 years old. I don't think and I think Kobe's a very prideful guy. Like, if he wants to win, he wants to win with him being the man winning, like him being the reason, the center of the show. So that's why I think even if the Lakers would want to trade Kobe, he wouldn't really want to leave. He'd rather retire. I don't think he wants to go to a team like New York or a team like Cleveland with superstars like Carmelo and LeBron being like the big fish on those teams. Kobe wants to be the reason that his team wins titles in the NBA. I mean, just look with the Lakers. You want Pau Gasol and Bynum, but who was the MVP? It was Kobe. I mean, this guy, he wants to be the reason to win. He's got so much pride and kind of a big ego. And really, we're going to talk about this later in the show. I think Kobe Bryant I think that deal he took, 2 years, $48.5 million, that was kind of a shot in the foot for him. Like, that was a signal to me that, yes, he wants to be a Laker for life, but does he really want to win? I don't know. But it's nice to see Kobe stick with the Lakers. I really think that the NBA needs more guys that stick with the franchise that they were drafted onto or traded onto early in their careers. It's really nice to see with guys like Dirk and Kobe. But I think Kobe being on the Lakers is a sign that he wants to win, but he wants to win his way. And I have no problem with that. Kobe needs to be on the Lakers right now. The Lakers are a bottom franchise right now. In a big market like LA, a historic market, an historic franchise known as the Los Angeles Lakers, I mean, they need Kobe. Otherwise, that stadium would be empty night in and night out.
I'm going to cut you guys off first. You have a phone call. Welcome to Sports Talk.
Do you guys think the NBA draft lottery is rigged?
Anybody want to start?
Thank you for your call. I was expecting this call because I know who it was. I know Jeremy and Holden you guys are very big on this. I've talked to Jeremy personally about this, but I'll start with Jeremy. What do you think about this? I know you have some pretty strong opinions.
I mean, first off, there's no way the draft lottery isn't fixed. You look at some of the events that have occurred that just leave you scratching your head as to why was it this year that a team with a 0.7% chance of winning the lottery or a crazy number, why is it this year that they win? Prime example, Derrick Rose, a product of Chicago, gets drafted to the Bulls. The year he enters the draft, the Bulls somehow get the first-round pick when they have something like a 3.7% chance of winning it. You look back to a time when the Orlando Magic organization was falling apart. They have I think it was a 0.9% chance of winning the lottery. This is when Shaq was coming into the league. They get the first-round pick. Shaquille O'Neal ends up putting on an Orlando Magic jersey. Even the past 3 drafts, the Cleveland Cavaliers get the first-round pick in, 3 of the last 4 drafts? And this is after LeBron departures. The NBA is a business. The NBA knows that if LeBron James is to return to Cleveland, it's a gold mine for them. Whether it's merchandise, ticket sales, TV marketing, whatever it is, it's a gold mine. They give them Andrew Wiggins. They give them Kyrie Irving. I mean, Anthony Bennett didn't work out the way they obviously wanted him to, but he's still there to intrigue LeBron to come back to Cleveland. If Cleveland gets 5th-round picks, you look at the guys they could potentially have. It's nothing like a Wiggins, a Kyrie team, the potential they had on that team. Getting these is obviously, it's so clear that they're trying to make LeBron turn to Cleveland, but they do it under the radar. No one realizes what's really going on. They just think, oh, what a great story, Dan Gilbert puts his son out there and he wins the draft lottery. Like it's some coincidence. The NBA draft lottery has been fixed for years prior to this, and it will be fixed for years to come. You never see a team like the Milwaukee Bucks or the Charlotte Bobcats get the first overall pick because those teams are irrelevant to the NBA. They don't care about them. They don't get them the big-time market games. They're nothing but just there. The NBA is a business, and they know what they have to do to sell tickets, to sell merchandise, whatever it is. They know what they need to do to be successful.
Holden?
Yeah, I definitely think in the last decade, I think in some years the draft wasn't fixed. They just let it play out. But in most of the years, especially with Cleveland getting those multiple number 1 picks and Chicago getting that pick to take Derrick Rose, those years were definitely fixed, no doubt in my mind. I mean, you get Derrick Rose, who was born in Chicago, raised in Chicago, Chicago high school star. The year he decides to come out of college, he gets drafted by the Chicago Bulls. And that is just a great story, isn't it? Like, Chicago-born kid coming back to Chicago to represent the Bulls, the franchise Michael Jordan built, and you have an opportunity to be the face of that franchise for the next decade. I mean, that is just such a stage story. And then you look at a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who had Kyrie Irving, Andrew Wiggins, and Anthony Bennett, 3 number 1 picks.
Not to mention Deion Waiters.
Not to mention,
4th.
Deion Waiters was 4, and
Tristan
Thompson was 4. I mean, that is a gold mine, like you said earlier, such an intriguing opportunity to bring back LeBron from Miami to Cleveland. And I think the NBA, in their heart of hearts, really wanted LeBron to stay in Cleveland and never leave because Cleveland is such an irrelevant city and such an irrelevant franchise. It's not like a Miami or Los Angeles or New York that they need, like Kevin Durant is to Oklahoma City. They need a LeBron James to be in Cleveland to sell tickets, to sell merchandise, to sell TV ratings, and to make that franchise relevant and not be like a Milwaukee or 76ers franchise that no one really, frankly, cares about except for Justin, obviously, with the Bucks. But I really think that also the NBA were thinking, you know what, yeah, LeBron in Miami is great with the big 3, but even if he leaves, they're still going to be a relevant franchise because they have Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. I mean, that's enough to get me to watch Miami Heat games. But definitely, I mean, think about 3 first-round picks, 3 number 1 picks for LeBron. I mean, that team LeBron could ride for the next decade and have a better opportunity to win titles. And it was just so fixed. It was just so fixed. And poor Cleveland, they just struck out on like 2 out of the 3 of those number 1 picks. I mean, Anthony Bennett, I think, is a bust. And Andrew Wiggins, I don't know yet. He's in Minnesota. You didn't really use that pick very wisely. You used it to get Kevin Love, and then Kyrie's obviously panned out. He's a great player. Tristan Thompson's pretty good. Deion Waiters is pretty good. That's a great team for LeBron and a great opportunity for the city of Cleveland. But I think definitely in the years like when New Orleans got Anthony Davis, that wasn't really fixed. I thought Anthony Davis going to New Orleans. It was all right. New Orleans.
I mean, you can maybe look at that too, because Chris Paul just
had
leaves.
recently
Yeah,
left.
just
maybe
left.
just to put a star there.
Right.
I mean, it wouldn't have been the biggest, because I think they had the second worst record that season. So it's like Charlotte or them's basically.
I'm just surprised how. I'm just really disgusted at the fact that a lot of these the draft is fixed, and as a result, a lot of these franchises who really need key
They don't get
players
a
and
chance.
star players who really deserve to actually be in like the top 5 in terms of the lottery because their records are so bad, aren't getting the chance to improve and rebuild their franchises. Teams like the 76ers or the Milwaukee Bucks or the Sacramento Kings. I mean, these are teams that have been in the basement for the NBA for so many years, and they haven't had a chance to really draft star players because they're not getting high pick selections.
I mean, I see what you guys are saying as far as most recent, especially with the Cavs, but I mean, you could make an argument that it isn't rigged, because if you look at like the Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, they're getting Andrew Bogut with the first pick. The Toronto Raptors getting Andrea Bargnani.
But these aren't. You didn't expect these guys to come in and be superstars. These were years when the first round pick, yeah, he's going to be a good player, but he's not a franchise-changing
Right.
player. So
True.
it doesn't matter where he ends up. It's not like when Anthony Davis came in, or Andrew Wiggins, or the Jabari Parker type draft, where it was this guy's going to be a stud. And obviously, giving the Bucks the second picks makes it look like it's not fixed. That's exactly what they're doing here, and they make it look good. They play it out well, Put Dan Gilbert's son on the board, and he's good luck, this and that.
And you can't say anything because his son has like an illness. So you
Yeah,
can't be like, that's
yeah.
rigged.
But then,
Just put his son
if
out
you look
there,
at
like,
say,
you jerk, he's
if you look
sick.
at like John Wall was a stud coming out of college. I mean,
Right.
could they have given him? I mean, obviously the Cavs wouldn't work out there, but I mean,
Yeah, I don't think
But the
John
Wizards,
Wall
but
draft,
the Wizards,
yeah.
if you look at it that way, the Wizards just lost Gilbert Arenas. There's problems going on in that locker
Right.
room. Just something to boost up the team, and,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be a team every year that's going to become a champion. It's just a team that needs the boost, or
Yeah.
they're in possible moving away or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's just something that needs something that
Right.
they're not necessarily.
It always seems like the team that gets the number 1 pick is always the team that just lost a major
some
superstar.
turmoil is going on, or
Compared to teams like Orlando or Milwaukee or like the 76ers, who haven't lost superstars, they just suck in general, and they just need like a number 1
They
pick
need guys.
so badly.
Yeah, no, I see what you guys are saying, especially the most recent years. Like, I had to admit, like, this year with the Cavs getting the pick, like, that's got to be fixed. I mean, of course, the Cavs ball pops out. Like, it's almost like they had it sitting there the whole time and it just popped out. But, I mean, this is a tough one. I mean, I've heard some people make the argument that if it's fixed, why don't the Lakers get it every year? Why doesn't this happen?
because
But
they don't need it.
Yeah,
they don't
they're
need
big
it.
market teams.
Yeah.
LA, New York, Boston, Miami. They're going to get star players just through free agency.
They don't need it like that.
True. But thank you for the call, by the way. We'll move back on to the topic which we were discussing before the phone call about Kobe staying. Did you have anything to add on, or?
Yeah, I just really want Kobe to be a Laker. He's just a lifer. He's hard as nails. He has a big ego, which I think is a big reason why he won't leave, because he wants to be the reason that the Lakers franchise wins and looks good while doing it.
I agree with both of you on this. I agree with
I
Jeremy.
gotta say though, the idea of him being a Laker for all of eternity or whatever it is, I don't know if Kobe stays if he doesn't have the firepower around him, like the Shaqs, the Gasols, the Bynums, they even tried to get him Steve Nash and Dwight Howard towards the end of his career. I mean, if the Lakers aren't trying to keep this guy, is he even a Laker for more than 5 to 6 years? I think that, I don't know if I'd compare him to a Dirk, because Dirk didn't know anything in the NBA before. This guy's an international player coming from Germany. I don't think he really wanted to change scenery because he doesn't know what it's like outside of Germany and Dallas or whatever it is. I think that if Kobe wasn't surrounded by these superstars, he could have turned out exactly like a LeBron, where he's chasing rings or whatever it is. He's following the stars. And some of the teams that are firepower now built them through whatever it was, and not necessarily just free agency. The Thunder with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and whatever it is, they drafted those kids, they molded them, they did what they had to do. The real story would be if Kevin Durant were to move to Washington, or Russell Westbrook were to move to, I don't know, maybe a Miami or a team like that. And then you look at Dwayne Wade in that conversation. If Chris Bosh and LeBron James don't accompany him in Miami, is he looking to go elsewhere? He did win a title with Shaq, but is that enough to feed his hunger for all the rings he wants? Does he end up signing maybe a small deal and then maybe joining Chris Bosh if he ends up in Cleveland or something like that. It's hard to compare these guys when they always had stars around them. And then even Dirk, he had Jason Kidd, he had Tyson Chandler when they won the title. I mean, I'm not considering Tyson Chandler an elite player, but he was there. I mean, they had a team of role players that really just got it done. It's hard to compare these guys when some have had stars around them their whole career, and LeBron, when he's in Cleveland, really didn't have much to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you here. I agree with Jeremy in the sense that he definitely should go after Michael Jordan's 6 rings, and I agree with Holden that he should stay in L.A. I think if he does stay in L.A., there is a possibility he could win the ring if he does get Kevin Love with. There's been rumors that he might opt out of his contract and sign with the Lakers if the season doesn't go as well. And there's rumors that Russell Westbrook also wants to return to L.A. and join the Lakers, so we'll see how that works. I mean, Kobe and Westbrook on the same team, that's a lot of shots going up every game. And I'm telling you, I don't think Robert Sacre is going to get a shot all year if that happens. But moving on, we're gonna stay in the NBA, and another big topic between the two people on the left and my right. The Thunder losing Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook to injuries. They're two best players. Should the Thunder tank the rest of the season and get a high pick and definitely do well next year? I mean, they have a decent draft this year. Or should they, keep battling with Reggie Jackson, get a decent record, and then when Westbrook and Durant come back, make a run in the playoffs? So what do you think they should do? I'll start with you, Holden.
Jeremy, Justin, I mean, I love the Thunder. I love KD. I love Westbrook. I love Ibaka. I love all those guys, watching them play every night, but I definitely think that this Thunder should consider tanking this season. And I only say that because they're in the Western Conference. If they were in the East, I would say get those guys back healthy. No matter how many games you've lost since they've been injured, you can fight back right into the top 3. But the fact that they're in the Western Conference with teams like the Clippers, the Spurs, the Warriors, the Nuggets, the Kings,
even the Suns,
the Mavs, I mean, so many teams, the Trailblazers, so much firepower in the Western Conference, and the teams already started off the season pretty horribly. You're not going to get Kevin Durant or Russell Westbrook back in about a month and a half. I mean, by that time, they could already have lost too many games to make it to maybe an 8th or 7th seed in the Western Conference. And if this was, I'm saying the Western Conference, if this was the East, I wouldn't be sweating. I'd be like, just get back healthy and do it, because the East
You're gonna be a 3 seed.
is weak. But the West is just so competitive and so deep that I think by the time these guys get healthy, the hole will already be too deep and they won't be able to make it back up the hole.
Jeremy, we saw you over here kind of rolling your eyes a little bit. Do we have another argument going on here? But what do you think?
In general, a lot of people are very critical of the idea of tanking. I, for one, agree with it. If you're not going to win now, might as well help yourself for the future, get picks or whatever it is. But in this situation, I can't see tanking when you have 2 superstars like Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant who are going to be back in a small amount of what the NBA season is going to be. Even if this team is 10 games below 500, they can still find a way to get in the postseason because Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook know how to win in the regular season. This team always shows up. They're always, 1 or 2 in the conference. When all is said and done in the regular season, they're always amongst, the top 3 or 4 or whatever it is. I think that the only thing they're losing right now is maybe home court for the postseason. Because if they somehow get a 7 or 8 seed, they're eventually going to have to play, a Spurs, a Clippers, a Mavs, whatever team they're going to play, a Rockets. They're eventually going to have to play them anyways. The only difference is you're playing them in the first round compared to maybe the 3rd round or 2nd round. If they make it there, they can do it because this team, I still think they are a superstar away, but anytime you have the reigning MVP and arguably the most athletic point guard in the NBA, one of the better scorers in the league on the same team, and they seem to work well together, I think there's no way you can tank a season just because they're going to be out for a month and a half, whatever it's going to be. If they come back and they're 2-20, then I can understand that. It's hard to get out of an 18-game hole when you're in a conference that's as competitive as the West. But if they come back and this team's, 10-21 or, 15-23 or something like that, I can see them still making the postseason because once these 2 guys are back on the floor, they're just as good as any other team in the Western Conference. So I think that as long as they feel like they are in a position where they can achieve, a 6, 7, or 8 seed, whatever it is, at the bottom of the Western Conference, they have to make that effort because you don't know how many seasons you have left with Kevin Durant. There's been rumors of him jumping to Washington. They hired his old high school coach. They've been doing all these things to possibly get him back, extending John Wall to a max deal, keeping him on the roster. If they only have 2 or 3 seasons left, you can't waste them now. And even if you do tank to get a potential star, are you really going to get someone in this draft that's as good as a Kevin Durant? And even if he is, you're still going to have to wait, 3 or 4 years for this guy to develop. And Russell Westbrook's already possibly coming out of his prime, or maybe just, he's already in the middle of his prime, and you might have lost 2 or 3 good years to win the championship. So I think that you can't tank at this position if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder because right now, time is against you, even though the 2 stars on the roster are very young.
I like what you both said. Personally, I've been watching some Thunder games, specifically the game last night against the Bucks. Don't get me wrong, I like the Bucks. I think they're a very good team. Not a very good, they're a good team this year. And they did lose last night, and to be honest, their only scoring is coming from Reggie Jackson. Nobody else can score there. Everybody thought Serge Ibaka maybe could take that next step, but he hasn't really been producing that much this year. I like what Jeremy said about the records because if they are very bad, I think you have to tank the rest of the season, no doubt. If you turn out very good, I think you got to go for it. But I think if you're if you're an average team or below, I think you have to tank the rest of the season because, as Jeremy mentioned, and Holden mentioned, the West is very bad, so it's going to be tough to get in with a bad record starting off. Also, if Westbrook and possibly Durant are leaving within the next couple years, maybe Westbrook to LA or Durant to Washington, I think if you can get a good player this year, maybe obviously you're not going to get another Kevin Durant. Maybe you will, but there's some decent forwards with the likes of Jahlil Okafor and Cliff Alexander coming out of college next year, the top 2 draft prospects. And I think if you can maybe snatch one of those guys after you do tank, not only will that help you next year because you're going to have a Durant, Westbrook, and possibly a Jahlil Okafor, but if Durant and Westbrook decide to leave, you still have a guy who's going to be that central piece, and you won't be horrible. So I think if they're very good, they have to go for it, but I think other than that, they do need to tank. But overall, I'm not a big fan of tanking. Really quickly, what do you guys think about tanking just in general?
I think as much as people may hate it, as much as people may talk down upon it, you play to win the game, whatever it is, if you're not in a position to make the postseason, there's no reason for you to be going out and trying to win all these games. What are you going to do if you're a middle-of-the-pack team and you're picking with the 10th, 11th pick? It's not like the NFL draft where there's so much depth that they have to have 7 rounds. There's 2 rounds in the NBA draft, and very rarely do you see a guy picked out of the top 5. Paul George, a first-round 10th pick. Very rarely do you see guys outside of the top 5, maybe top 7 in picks, really become a superstar and really become someone you really want on your team to be your franchise player, to be the man. LeBron James, first overall pick. Kevin Durant, another high pick. It's hard for teams to become a super team, really, if they don't have a superstar around them. And it seems like it's hard to get one when you're not within the first 5 or 6 picks. So I think that tanking is going to be a part of the game, and it's going to be unless the draft lottery, they find a way to fix it or they find a way to make it so it's almost not as bad to tank or compared to trying to win every game. But unless that's the case, I think that tanking is going to continue on, and that it's going to be best for the team that's doing it.
Hold on, what do you think about tanking?
I'm personally disgusted with tanking. I don't like to see it because you have fans out there who are rabid fans for some of these loser franchises like the Bucks and the Sixers, and they're still paying money to come to these games, paying season tickets, devoting all their heart and soul into cheering for these teams, and these teams simply, some of these guys just don't care. They're just there for the money, and all they want to do is make their money, get their playing time, and then go home, and they're not really interested in what the final score is on the scoreboard, whether they win or lose. But frankly, if you're a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, you're not going to attract and build a really good team through free agency. Who wants to come and play in Oklahoma City? What's there to do in Oklahoma City? It's not like Miami or New York. There aren't clubs and restaurants and attractive places to go hang out after you play a basketball game. So I really think Oklahoma City, their strength, obviously, is through the draft process. For a while, the Oklahoma City Thunder were tanking and really doing terrible until they drafted guys like James Harden, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook and Serge Ibaka. And even after they drafted those guys, it took a couple of years for them to develop and come together as a team. And then they started to really jump into the elite conversation with the Spurs and the Mavericks and the Miami Heat with LeBron. And so it took them a while. So I think smaller market teams really do need to tank because they're not going to attract guys through free agency. They're going to build their teams through the draft. And like you said earlier, Jeremy, unless you have a top 5 pick or a top 7 pick in the NBA draft, you're not going to find a diamond in the rough player or a guy who's going to be really a superstar for your franchise. It's not like the NFL draft, right, where you draft a guy in like the 3rd round who ends up being like a all-pro, Pro Bowl, or Super Bowl winning champ. It's just not going to happen. So, I mean, we've seen guys in the NBA draft time and time again, Greg Oden, who else? Sebastian Telfair. I mean, these guys are scrubs.
Bargnani.
I mean, even Bogut to an extent. They've been scrubs.
Yeah.
So if you're a team like Oklahoma City or Milwaukee, you should really consider tanking. I wouldn't say full-blown tanking, like just like make it really obvious, but sort of mask it a bit because you really need a top 5 pick to be relevant.
I would have to disagree with you on the idea that the fans wouldn't like the idea of their team tanking. I think that not necessarily a true fan, but a fan that's really following would see what's happening. They would see, what's happening behind the curtain. They would realize that their team needs to get a star player, and if they're not going to get it through free agency because they're a small market team like the Bucks or OKC or whatever it is, I think that they realize that the only way they're going to do this is through the draft. I mean, I don't think there's any 76ers fans at any games right now that are annoyed that Nerlens Noel is not playing the whole 48 minutes of the game because they want him to win the game. I think that these fans see the writing on the walls. They know what's really happening within the organization, and they know what they need to become a successful franchise. So, I mean, maybe the average fan says, these guys aren't playing the hardest or whatever, but the true fan that's really looking at the team and really seeing what's going on, they know what needs to be done for their organization to become an elite team.
You don't want to be in the Goldilocks zones in the NBA where you're
not good
enough to win a title, and you're getting like mid 20th picks in the draft. That's not where you want to be. That's where the Bucks are. Jeremy mentioned the Hawks, the Denver Nuggets, teams like that where that's the worst place to be in the NBA. Like, that's why tanking sometimes does help, because if you look at the Bucks, they easily could have probably been a 500 team if they really tried last year, and maybe made an 8 seed, but who would they have? They wouldn't have Jabari Parker right now, and they'd probably be in the same situation. So sometimes tanking does help. But moving on, we're going to move into the NFL. We're going to discuss the most overpaid quarterback in the NFL. Holden, I'm going to start with you. Who do you think is the most overpaid QB in the NFL today?
Well, for me, it's a really difficult decision. I'm going to have to go with Joe Flacco of the Baltimore Ravens. 6 years, $120 million. And it was warranted right when he won the Super Bowl. 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had a great run in the playoffs and then capped it off winning the Super Bowl against the 49ers. At that moment, I was like, give him his money. It's warranted. He won the Super Bowl. What else do you want? And he did it in a great fashion. But ever since then, this guy has just flat out stunk it up. The Ravens didn't make the playoffs last year. They're looking pretty shaky this year. Joe Flacco has all the weapons. He has Steve Smith, Torrey Smith, Owen Daniels. He's got a rock-solid defense. He had
Ray Rice.
He had Ray Rice last year. He had Dennis Pitta. He's had all the weapons in the world and a great defense and a great coaching staff, and he simply hasn't produced. And I think when you pay a big-money quarterback that type of money, you automatically assume that he needs to start putting up monster statistics, like Peyton Manning kind of statistics, like Aaron Rodgers kind of statistics, where he's throwing an average of 25 to over 30 touchdowns a year, to over 4,000 passing yards a year. He's making it to the playoffs every year. Those are typical traits associated with big money quarterbacks. Even Matt Ryan, to an extent, he threw for over 4,000 yards and 20 touchdowns last year, and he got a big money deal. Even Andy Dalton had pretty good statistics last year. When you pay a quarterback big money, it's like there's a new label on the quarterback. You need to be above 4,000 yards passing and above 30 touchdowns, and we won't consider you a scrub. I'm not saying Joe Flacco's a scrub. I'm saying he's being a scrub to the standard he's being paid. And Joe Flacco, frankly, hasn't been that guy in his career where he's posted monster statistics. He's always been fourth quarter clutch to playoff ice-cold blood veins. I mean, this dude is money in the playoffs. You get him in the playoffs, you're going to make a good run. But during the regular season, it's going to be a rough and rocky road because he's not going to win games for you. Baltimore wins games based off their running attack and great defense. They've never had to rely on Joe Flacco to win games in the regular season. And frankly, he hasn't been that big fantasy type player that puts up huge numbers. He's always been a playoff type quarterback. So for that reason, I consider him a bust because you've seen what that contract has done for the rest of that team. They haven't been able to go out and sign big money time free agents. They got Steve Smith, but they got him on the cheap. They got Darryl Smith at linebacker, but they got him on the cheap. They haven't been able to go out in free agency and get big money names like Lamar Houston or Martellus Bennett. I mean, these big names in free agency. And I think Baltimore is a great environment and a great fan base to play for, but that contract has just killed Baltimore's salary cap.
Jeremy, what do you think about most overpaid?
I have to 100% disagree on the Joe Flacco contract. I think that I do believe that this guy was overpaid. I do think that he didn't deserve the $6-year, $120 million deal that he got, but he did win the Super Bowl, so it's understandable why the Ravens would give him this deal. If you look at the team he had when they won the Super Bowl compared to the team he has had the past 2 seasons, it is a drastic difference. You lose Ray Lewis, the heart and soul of your defense for the last 10, 15 years, the entire team. Ed Reed, the safety ball hawk, been there for forever, been making plays his entire career. The only constant you have on that defense is Nada in the middle. Donnell Ellerbe was supposed to be the guy that was supposed to step in and be the next Ray Lewis for that team. He jumped ships and joins the Dolphins in free agency. Ray Rice had his worst statistical season ever last season. And all of a sudden, Joe Flacco has to shy away from what he's been doing his entire career and become this passer that throws 50, 60 times a game. And, with the weapons, given they got Steve Smith this year to help him out, but before that, he had Torrey Smith and who else? This guy had no one last season. I don't even think Owen Daniels wasn't on the team yet. This guy had Torrey Smith, and that was it. Dennis Pitta went down early with, I believe it was a back injury, and this team just became nothing. They went from a Super Bowl team. They lost like 6 or 7 of their starters. He had the worst statistical season of his career, and now he's possibly going to jail for what he's doing now.
Who was that number 12 guy on the Ravens? Was it
Jacoby Jones. That's their star wide receiver. You're supposed to be Jacoby Jones. This guy was 3rd string on the Houston Texans, for God's sakes. Their team was completely different. They lost 6 starters on defense after the Super Bowl, and then Ray Rice comes out and plays horrible. That offensive line isn't what it was when they won the Super Bowl. This guy hasn't had the same group he had, and even that Super Bowl team could have been better. He didn't have as much weapons as there's quarterbacks that are considered elite today had. If I'm supposed to pick a guy that's most overpaid, I'm going with Jay Cutler. The only thing elite about this guy is his salary, what Brian Urlacher said earlier, and that's the truth. This guy has weapons beyond belief, and Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffries, Martellus Bennett, Matt Forte catches balls out of the backfield. How can you not find an open receiver? And the Bears have just been playing horrible. I haven't seen them play a good game since they beat the Jets. The Jets. That's their good game that Jay Cutler has played in. Jay Cutler is the most overpaid quarterback in this league.
Well, I definitely think with the Bears, Jay Cutler is overrated, and I didn't think he deserved his contract. But you look at that team, and their problems aren't on the offensive side of the ball. It's on the defensive side of the ball. You look at that team, you gave up 51 points to New England, then 55 to Green Bay in back-to-back weeks. I put that on the defense. Ever since Mark Trestman came in after Lovie Smith got fired, that team went from top 5 in defense to the bottom 5 in defense. I put that all on Mark Trestman. You literally take over a team that was top 5 in defense, and they did a complete 180. That team has not looked like the dominant Chicago Bears defense that we've been used to seeing over the years. And you look at Jay Cutler, yes, he has weapons like Brandon Marshall, Martellus Bennett, Matt Forte, and Alshon Jeffrey, but you look at the strength of this team, and it's running the ball with Matt Forte off the play-action pass with Jay Cutler. And they simply haven't done that this season. They've neglected to run the ball, and they're forcing it into Jay Cutler's hands. And I agree with you, he hasn't produced. But if you're constantly going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and then your defense is giving up points after points after points, that's a mutually balanced effort where I look at a team like the Baltimore Ravens, yes, they did lose Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, but that defense was statistically on par with how they were when Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were on that team during the Super Bowl run. And they just couldn't produce on the offensive end because you look at every single quarterback that's been paid those $100 million salaries, whether it's been Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, all these guys have monster fantasy statistics, and they're just producing stats like no tomorrow. And you look at Joe Flacco, and he's never been that guy in his career, and all of a sudden the Ravens asked him to do that, and I think that was completely unfair because I didn't think he frankly deserved that kind of money and that kind of guarantee to all of a sudden make that leap to be that kind of guy. That team revolved around their defense to win games and their running game with Ray Rice to win games. And last season they put it all on Joe Flacco, and he got overwhelmed.
Jay Cutler is the reason the Bears are where they are right now because he's so unlikable in that locker room. That defense lacks a leader. And that's his fault because he drove away the leader of that franchise for the last 10 years in Brian Urlacher. Brian Urlacher was willing to stay in Chicago, but he could not stand Jay Cutler because he's just not a good guy. No one wants to be around him. And if your quarterback, the guy that's supposed to be your leader, is one of the most disliked players on your team, and you're giving him the money, the majority of the money amongst the team, he's probably getting paid more than some of the stars on the team on the defensive end. How are you supposed to get better players if you're investing so much money in a guy that no one wants to play around? Not only are they not going to come because you don't have the funds to supply them, but they don't want to be around this guy. Lance Briggs is the best player on that defense, and he's never had to be the vocal leader of a team like Brian Urlacher was. And then you're throwing him in that position and expecting him to do what he hasn't done in his whole career. Joe Flacco has never been this guy came out of the University of Delaware. He never had to put up big numbers the way he had to. He was there because Ray Rice did what he had to do, and he made the big plays in the postseason. The defense was going to get him there, and he was going to win the big games because that's what Joe Flacco was there to do. And when you take away, Ray Rice having a horrible season, he worked off the play action just like Jay Cutler did. And when these guys are put in those situations, they're not able to perform. These guys are both overpaid, but I think Jay Cutler is definitely the more overpaid than Joe Flacco.
I definitely agree that Jay Cutler's overpaid, and frankly, when Josh McCown was quarterback, I was a really big fan of Josh McCown, and I think he should have stayed in while Jay Cutler just could sit out the rest of the season, even though he was healthy enough to return, because you looked at the numbers Josh McCown was producing at the time, they were amazing, like all-pro kind of statistics, and he was the hot hand, and whenever you have a hot hand at quarterback, I think you should ride with that hot hand and not put a guy who's been rusty and injured. And frankly, Jay Cutler, I think Brandon Marshall said it the other day in a press conference, like the reason he's like so disliked and so like grumpy all the time because he had diabetes or something, which I thought was like a lame excuse and obviously a real sign that the locker room doesn't believe in Jay Cutler. But I think also coupled with the fact that they have a coach like Mark Trestman, who frankly, I think of him more as a coordinator and a great offensive mind and a great offensive coordinator, but he is not a leader of men. He does not get you riled up on game day like Lovie Smith used to. He is not a personality like Lovie Smith. And frankly, I don't think Jay Cutler deserves to be in Chicago, and I think Joe Flacco either needs more weapons or you need to talk about restructuring his contract because those big money guys like Tony Romo, Aaron Rodgers, they're playoff winners, but at the same time, they put up monster numbers, and I think Joe Flacco needs to start doing that.
Well said. That's all we have for this edition of Sports Talk. Be sure to tune in this Monday. That'll be our next show where we'll have more heated debates and some great sports discussions. Thank you for watching. I'm Justin Palillo.
I'm Jeremy Ferner.
And I'm Jake Peavy. I'm Holden Pirelli.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.